I am Joshua, 36 years old, and I stood in a room full of people who shared my DNA but knew absolutely nothing about the man I really was. I watched my brother humiliate my son for the 10th time that night while my parents nodded in agreement, sipping their wine like it was holy water. Before I tell you about the moment I destroyed their entire reality with a single blue folder and a set of car keys, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels because what happened in that dining room needs to be heard. It was a Sunday. In my family, Sunday dinners were mandatory. It was a tradition my mother, Lydia, enforced with an iron fist. If you missed a Sunday, you didn't just miss a meal. You were making a statement that you didn't care about this family. That was the rule. I pulled my 2014 Honda Civic into the driveway of my parents' house in suburban Chicago. The brakes squeaked a little, a high-pitched whine that announced our arrival before we even stopped. I needed to get that fixed, but honestly, I kept the car this way on purpose. It was part of the uniform of the struggling, widower single dad who couldn't quite get his act together. My 10-year-old son, Isaac, sat in the passenger seat. He was clutching his violin case like it was a life preserver in a stormy sea. He looked pale, his knuckles white against the black handle of the case. "Do we have to go in, Dad?" he asked. His voice was small, barely a whisper. It broke my heart every time he used that tone. It wasn't just fear. It was resignation. I turned off the engine and looked at him. "We do, buddy. Just for a couple of hours. Stick with me. Ignoring them is a superpower. Remember." "I know," Isaac said, looking out the window, avoiding my eyes. "But Uncle Caleb is already here." I followed his gaze. Parked right in the center of the driveway, blocking the path to the garage like a conquering tank, was a gleaming, cherry-red Ferrari Purosang. It was fresh from the detailer, the paint looking wet under the porch lights. It screamed money. It screamed status. It was aggressive, loud, and completely unnecessary for a family dinner. It was everything my brother Caleb wanted the world to think he was. "Let's go," I said, unbuckling my seatbelt. "Head high, Isaac. You have nothing to be ashamed of." We walked up to the front door. I could already hear the laughter inside. It was loud, boisterous, and completely lacking in warmth. My stomach tightened. I wasn't nervous for myself. I was past that years ago. I was nervous for Isaac. Every time we crossed this threshold, I felt like I was leading a lamb into a den of wolves. We walked in. The smell of roast beef and expensive cologne hit me immediately. It was a cloying mix. Caleb was holding court in the living room, a glass of expensive scotch in one hand, gesturing wildly with the other. He was wearing a tailored Italian suit that probably cost more than the Kelly Blue Book value of my car. My mother, Lydia, was sitting on the couch, looking at him with pure adoration. My father, Eli, was standing by the fireplace, nodding at whatever brilliance Caleb was spewing. "And look who finally decided to show up," Caleb announced, his voice booming. He didn't stand up to greet us. He just swirled his drink. The freelancer and his protege. "Hello, Joshua." "Hello, Caleb," I said, keeping my voice even. "Hi, Mom." "Hi, Dad. Sorry if we're a few minutes behind." "You're late," my father grunted. He didn't look at my face. He was looking at my worn-out jeans and the faded flannel shirt I wore. "And you didn't shave." "I've been working, Dad," I said. "Working?" Caleb scoffed. He took a sip of his scotch, letting the amber liquid coat his tongue before swallowing. "Clicking buttons on a laptop in your pajamas isn't work, Joshua. It's a hobby. Real men go to an office. Real men build empires. They don't sit around playing with spreadsheets." I didn't take the bait. I put a hand on Isaac's shoulder, feeling the tension in his small frame. "Go say hi to Grandma." Isaac walked over to my mother. "Hi, Grandma," he said politely. My mother looked him up and down. She frowned, reaching out to touch a lock of his hair. "Isaac, why is your hair so long? You look like a girl. Doesn't your father ever take you to a barber?" "I like it this way," Isaac mumbled, pulling back slightly. "Speak up, boy," my father barked from the fireplace. Mumbling is for cowards. Stand up straight. Isaac stiffened, his posture snapping to attention out of fear, not respect. I felt the heat rising in my chest. This was within the first 2 minutes. He's fine, Dad. I cut in, stepping between them. He's 10. Leave him alone. He's soft, Caleb said, walking over and patting Isaac on the head a little too hard, messing up the hair Isaac had carefully brushed before we left. That's what happens when you don't have a mother figure in the house. No offense, Joshua, but you're not exactly teaching him how to be an alpha, are you? Look at him. He's carrying a violin. Why isn't he playing football like my Nathan? Nathan, Caleb's 11-year-old son, was sitting in the corner playing on a brand new iPad. He looked up and smirked. He was a mini Caleb in training, absorbing the toxicity like a sponge. Violin takes discipline, I said quietly. Isaac is talented. Talent doesn't pay the mortgage, Caleb laughed. Speaking of mortgages, how's that little apartment of yours? Still renting? You know, interest rates are climbing. If you don't buy soon, you'll be renting forever. That's practically throwing money in the trash. We're happy where we are, I lied. Or rather, I told the version of the truth they could handle. The truth was, they saw a man in a faded shirt driving a Honda. They saw a widower who had given up. They saw a sheep. But as I stood there, listening to Caleb brag about his new Ferrari and his upcoming trip to the Maldives, a thought crossed my mind. They thought they were the lions of this jungle. They didn't know they were standing in the cage with the zookeeper. And the zookeeper was getting ready to close the gate. To understand why I let them talk to me like that, why I endured the insults about my clothes and my car, you have to understand the scar that wouldn't fade. You have to understand the last 5 years of my life. 5 years ago, my wife Emily died. It wasn't a long illness. We didn't have time to say goodbye or prepare. It was a drunk driver on a Tuesday afternoon. She was coming home from the library. Just like that, my world ended. Isaac was 5. I was 31. I was working as a mid-level analyst at a logistics firm back then. When Emily died, I fell apart. I couldn't focus. Couldn't sleep. I showed up to work in a daze, wearing mismatched socks, forgetting to eat. Eventually, they let me go. Compassionate leave turned into a severance package. My family's reaction wasn't support. It was judgment. You need to pull yourself together, my father had told me at the funeral, standing over Emily's open grave while the dirt was still fresh. Men don't wallow. You have a son to feed. He's grieving, Eli, my mother had said, but her tone was dismissive, like I was a toddler throwing a tantrum. But he does need to think about money. Sarah didn't have much life insurance, did she? She didn't. We were young. We thought we had time. We thought we would grow old on a porch somewhere. The insurance payout was modest, $150,000. To my parents, that was a significant amount, but in the grand scheme of raising a child alone, it was a drop in the bucket. To a young widower with a 5-year-old and no job, it was a ticking clock. That was the moment the narrative was written. Joshua is the broken one. Joshua is the charity case. Caleb, meanwhile, was rising in the real estate world, flashing watches and leasing cars, becoming the golden child my father always wanted. But here is the secret I kept locked in my chest, right next to the pain of losing Emily. I didn't just sit on that couch for 5 years. I took that $150,000 insurance money. It was everything Emily had left us. I was terrified of losing it, but I was more terrified of being poor and helpless. I had a background in data analysis. I understood patterns. While my family thought I was depressed and sleeping all day, I was studying the markets. I didn't sleep. I traded. I analyzed emerging tech sectors. I read financial reports until my eyes bled. I treated the stock market like a battlefield where I was fighting for Isaac's life. And I was good at it. Scary good. The first year, I turned that $150,000 into $400,000. By year 3, I hit my first million. By year 4, I started buying distressed assets, businesses that were failing but had good bones. I turned them around or sold them for parts. I incorporated a private holding company. I named it J&E Holdings. Joshua and Emily. I was the majority shareholder. I was the silent partner in 3 manufacturing firms and a tech startup in Austin. I acquired a controlling interest in a mid-sized regional bank. But I never told my parents. Why? Because the one time I mentioned I made a good trade early on, Caleb asked for a loan to fix his boat. When I hesitated, my mother said, "Family helps family, Joshua. Don't be greedy." I realized then that if they knew I had money, I would never know if they loved me or my wallet. And worse, they would try to control how I spent it. They would try to control Isaac. They would insist he go to the boarding schools they liked, wear the clothes they chose, and become a miniature version of Caleb. So I bought a costume. The costume was the 2014 Honda Civic. The costume was the small 2-bedroom apartment in a modest neighborhood, which I actually owned outright, along with the entire building, though the tenants paid rent to a property management firm I controlled. They didn't need to know that I lived a double life. During the day, I dropped Isaac off at school in the Honda. Then, I drove to a private parking garage downtown where J&E Holdings had its office. I parked the Honda. I walked to spot 4B. That's where the beast lived. A Porsche Panamera Turbo S, jet black. It wasn't just a car. It was a sanctuary. It was the only place where I allowed myself to feel successful. I would sit in that leather seat, smell the new car scent, and just breathe. It was my reminder that I wasn't a failure. I wasn't a mess. But I never drove it to my parents' house. I never drove it to school events. Which brings us back to the dinner, and why the insults stung so much. It wasn't because they were true. It was because they were so pathetically false, yet I couldn't correct them without exposing Isaac to their greed. The week before the dinner, things had started to shift. The storm clouds were gathering, and I should have seen them coming. It started with a phone call from my lawyer and right-hand man, Mr. Gray. Mr. Gray was the CEO of the bank I had acquired. Technically, I was Mr. Gray's boss, though I let him run the show and only stepped in for major strategic decisions. "Mr. Joshua," Gray's voice was tense on the phone. "We have a situation with a loan in the queue. It's flagged as a conflict of interest for you." "What is it?" I asked, looking at a spreadsheet on my monitor in my home office, the bedroom my brother mocked. "It's a foreclosure proceeding. The borrower is Caleb Miller." I stopped typing. "My brother?" "Yes, sir. He has a commercial loan for a real estate venture that went belly up 6 months ago. He guaranteed it with his personal assets, including his current house. He's missed 3 mortgage payments. The system is set to seize the property." I spun my chair around, looking out the window at the city skyline. "He told everyone he just closed a $2 million deal. The credit report says otherwise, sir. He's maxed out on everything. He's drowning. And there's something else." "Tell me." "He submitted a new application yesterday for a jumbo mortgage on a property in Hidden Hills, the one he's been bragging about. And he falsified his income statements. He's trying to use a non-existent bonus and forged tax documents to qualify. He photocopied a W-2 from 2 years ago and changed the dates. My brother wasn't just broke. He was committing bank fraud. Felony. What do you want to do, sir? We can reject it quietly, or we can report it." I thought about the insults. I thought about how he called Isaac a sissy because he liked art. I thought about my father telling me I should be more like Caleb. "Approve the purchase of his bad debt," I said coldly. "Move his commercial loan and his current mortgage from the general pool to my personal holding portfolio." "Sir, you heard me? He's toxic. I want to own his debt, Gray. I want to be the one holding the paper." "Understood. And the Hidden Hills application? Let it pend. I'll handle that personally." I hung up the phone. I felt a mix of guilt and power. I wasn't planning to ruin him. I just wanted leverage. I wanted him to stop bullying my son. I wanted to sit him down privately and say, "I own your house. Stop being a jerk, and we can work this out." I was going to be the bigger man. I was going to be the savior. But I didn't know the full extent of the rot yet. I didn't know that while I was planning to save him, he was planning to destroy me. That same afternoon, I went to pick up Isaac from school, but the Honda wouldn't start. The battery was dead. I had to call a tow truck, and we were stuck waiting for an hour. While we waited, my phone rang. It was Caleb. "Hey, little brother," he said. His voice had that fake salesman charm, but there was an edge of desperation underneath it that I hadn't noticed before. Now that I knew his financial status, it was glaring. "What do you need, Caleb?" "I've got an opportunity. A once-in-a-lifetime thing. Tech startup needs bridge capital. I know you're sitting on that insurance money from Emily. Still probably getting 0.0% interest in a savings account." My grip on the phone tightened. He thought I was still living off Emily's death benefit. He thought I was hoarding it like a dragon, while in reality, I had multiplied it 20 times over. "I'm not interested, Caleb." "Don't be stupid, Joshua. I'm trying to help you. You put in 50 grand, I can triple it in a month. You can finally buy a decent car. Get Isaac some, I don't know, manly lessons. Boxing or something." "No." His tone changed instantly. The charm evaporated. "You selfish prick. You're just sitting on cash while family is out here hustling. You know, mom and dad are worried about Isaac. They think you're depressed. Unfit. Unfit." The word came out as a growl. "Yeah, custody is a tricky thing, Joshua. Grandparents have rights in this state. If they can prove the father is financially unstable and emotionally checked out." He let the threat hang in the air. "Are you threatening to take my son?" "I'm saying you should help the family. Or the family might have to help Isaac by taking him somewhere stable." He hung up. I stood there on the side of the road, the dead Honda behind me, my son kicking rocks near the curb. My brother had threatened to use my poverty against me to steal the only thing I lived for. That was the moment the savior died. I looked at Isaac. He looked up at me, sensing my anger. "Dad, is everything okay?" "Everything is going to be fine, Isaac," I said. But inside I was declaring war. The threat of a custody battle woke something up inside me that I hadn't felt since the early days of trading. It was a cold, calculating rage. Caleb wasn't just a nuisance anymore. He was a predator. And predators don't stop until they are put down. The next day, Wednesday, I needed to clear my head. I left Isaac at his violin lesson and went to the grocery store. It was a mundane task, but I needed the normalcy. I was pushing my cart down the cereal aisle, debating between oatmeal and bran flakes, when I saw a woman standing in front of the generic brands, weeping. It was Hannah, Caleb's wife. Hannah was the opposite of Caleb. She was kind, quiet, and usually impeccably dressed in designer labels that Caleb insisted she wear. But today, she wasn't wearing her usual oversized sunglasses. She was wearing a tracksuit that looked days old. She looked exhausted, her blonde hair pulled back in a messy bun. Her cart wasn't filled with the organic, premium items she usually bought to keep up appearances. It had cheap pasta, generic sauce, and bulk rice. No wine. No expensive steaks. I approached her slowly. "Hannah!" She jumped, quickly wiping her eyes with the sleeve of her sweatshirt. "Joshua, I didn't see you." "Hi. Are you okay?" I asked, keeping my voice low. She tried to smile, but her lip quivered. She looked around to see if anyone was watching. Then the dam broke. She covered her face with her hands. "It's all a lie, Joshua," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Everything. What is? What's going on?" That interaction changed the landscape of the battlefield. Caleb wasn't just a bully to me. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen. The man who called me a useless freelancer, who mocked my car, who threatened to take my son. He was nothing more than a desperate gambler in a fancy suit. I felt a cold resolve settle over me. The time for being the bigger man was over. The time for protecting the family peace was over. If he wanted a war over money, I would give him one. But I wouldn't use a Honda Civic. I would bring out the tank. Thursday was the final straw. The event that turned my resolve into action. I was working from home, monitoring a merger in Tokyo when I got an email. It was from St. Jude's Academy. St. Jude's was the Harvard of elementary schools in our city. It was prestigious, expensive, and incredibly hard to get into. My parents had been trying to get Nathan, Caleb's son, into St. Jude's for 3 years. He had been rejected twice. The email was addressed to me. Dear Mr. Joshua Miller, we are pleased to inform you that based on his exceptional aptitude test scores and his musical portfolio, Isaac has been offered a full scholarship to St. Jude's Academy for the upcoming fall semester. I was stunned. I hadn't even applied. Then I saw the CC line. It was copied to the guidance counselor at Isaac's public school. Isaac had applied himself. My 10-year-old son had filled out the forms, got his teacher to recommend him, and submitted it without telling me because he didn't want me to worry about the tuition. I was bursting with pride. I literally jumped out of my chair and pumped my fist. Yes. But 20 minutes later, my phone rang. It was my mother. Joshua. Her voice was icy. Did you pull strings? What? Strings for what? St. Jude's. Caleb just called. He found out Isaac got in. The school posted the scholarship list on their website. Oh. Yeah, isn't it great? He did it all on his own, Mom. Kevin didn't get in, she said flatly. They rejected Kevin again. That's unfortunate, but Isaac earned it. You have to decline it, she said. I froze. Excuse me? You have to decline the spot. It will break Caleb's heart. Nathan is the smart one, Joshua. Isaac is, well, he's artsy. He won't fit in at St. Jude's. It looks bad if your son gets in and Caleb's doesn't. It upsets the family balance. You want me to take an opportunity away from my son to protect Caleb's ego? I'm asking you to be considerate. Caleb is going through a lot of stress with his big deals. He doesn't need this humiliation. Just tell the school you can't afford the uniforms or something. Or that it's too far to drive. Mom, it's a full scholarship. It's his future. There are other schools. Don't be selfish, Joshua. I hung up the phone. I didn't say goodbye. I just pressed the red button. They wanted me to sabotage my son's future. They wanted to clip his wings so Caleb's son wouldn't feel bad about not being able to fly. That was the line. They had crossed it. I walked into my home office. I opened my safe. I took out the deed to my apartment building. I took out the statements for J&E Holdings. And I called Mr. Gray. Execute the purchase of the debt, I told him. Right now. I want the paperwork signed and certified by Friday afternoon. Sir, are you sure? I'm done being the punching bag, Gray. It's time to hit back. Okay. The loan transfer will be complete in 24 hours. You will legally own the mortgage on his house and his commercial notes. And Gray. Yes. Get the foreclosure notice ready. Put it in a blue folder. A bright blue one. And have my driver bring the Porsche to the neighborhood on Sunday. Tell him to park 3 blocks away and wait for my text. The Porsche, sir? You're breaking cover. I'm not just breaking cover, I said, looking at the picture of Emily and Isaac on my desk. I'm burning the camouflage. So when I walked into that dinner on Sunday, I wasn't just armed with a folder. I was armed with the righteous fury of a father who had been pushed too far. Caleb thought he was fighting a sheep. He didn't know he was stepping into the cage with a lion. Back in the dining room, the air was thick with the scent of roast beef and condescension. We sat around the large mahogany dining table. My mother sat at one end, my father at the other. Caleb sat on my father's right, the seat of honor. Hannah sat next to him, looking down at her plate, avoiding my eyes. I sat on the left with Isaac beside me. The conversation, as always, revolved around Caleb. So, the deal closed on Friday. Caleb was saying, cutting into his meat with aggressive precision. $2 million on the table. I walked in, told them take it or leave it, and walked out. They called me back in 5 minutes. That's how you handle business. That's my boy. My father beamed, raising his glass. You have the killer instinct, Caleb. Just like I did. I'm looking at upgrading the Mercedes, Caleb continued, glancing at me to make sure I was listening. Maybe a Range Rover next. Something with more presence. Or maybe just another Ferrari for the weekends. I chewed my food slowly. A Range Rover? He couldn't afford a range of appetizers at this point. A Ferrari? Kevin piped up. Uncle Joshua drives a Honda. It smells like old French fries. The table erupted in laughter. Even my mother chuckled. Isaac stopped eating. He put his fork down. "It's a reliable car, Nathan," I said. "It's an embarrassment," my father corrected. "Joshua, I told you I could get you a job at the plant. Supervisor role. You'd have benefits. A steady paycheck. You could get a real car. Why are you so stubborn?" "I have a job, Dad. I do market analysis. I have clients." "Freelancing," my mother sighed. "It's so unstable. What if you get sick? Who will take care of Isaac? You have to think about the future. You can't just float through life." "I'm not floating," I said, trying to keep the edge out of my voice. Then Caleb turned his attention to Isaac. He seemed bored with bragging about himself and needed a new target. "So Isaac," Caleb said, pointing his fork at my son. "Nathan made the varsity soccer team. Starting forward. What are you doing? Still playing that squeaky fiddle?" "It's a violin," Isaac said, looking at his plate. "And I made first chair in the district orchestra. And I got into St. Jude's." The table went silent. My mother shot me a look of pure venom. I hadn't declined the spot. "St. Jude's?" Caleb put his fork down. "That's impossible. Nathan didn't get in." "How could you get in?" "I got a scholarship," Isaac whispered. "Scholarship?" Caleb rolled his eyes. "Probably a diversity quota or something. Charity case." He looked at my father. "See, this is what I'm talking about. The boy needs toughening up. He's surrounded by softness. He thinks the world is going to hand him things because he plays a sad song." "I earned it," Isaac said, his voice trembling. "Don't yell at your uncle," my father snapped. "I'm just saying," Caleb continued, leaning forward, a smirk playing on his lips. "Single parenthood has its challenges. We get it. But Isaac seems a bit behind. Emotionally, physically. Maybe if your son had two parents, specifically a mother, he wouldn't be such a mess." The room went dead silent. The word mess hung in the air like a foul odor. Isaac pushed his plate away. His lip trembled. He fought it. He tried so hard to be brave, but a single tear rolled down his cheek. "Oh, look," Nathan laughed. "He's crying. What a baby." "Stop it," Hannah whispered to Caleb, touching his arm. "That's enough. I'm just trying to help." Caleb threw his hands up. "Someone has to tell the truth. Joshua is ruining the kid. Look at him. A boy needs a mother to be a man. Look at him crying over a little criticism. You're a weak, motherless sissy. Isaac, you're as useless as your father." My father nodded. "Caleb is right, Joshua. You're too soft on him. Maybe you should let him stay with us for the summer. We'll straighten him out. Get him away from that apartment and that lifestyle." I placed my napkin on the table. My hand was shaking, not from fear, but from a rage so cold it felt like ice in my veins. I had taken the insults about my car. I had taken the insults about my job. I had taken the insults about my clothes. But they had made my son cry. They had called him a motherless sissy. "You think he's a mess because he plays the violin?" I asked. My voice was low, but it cut through the room like a razor blade. "I think he's a mess because his father is a loser who can't provide a stable environment," Caleb spat out. "And I think you're jealous because I'm the one carrying this family's name to new heights." "Heights?" I stood up. I reached down into my battered leather satchel sitting by my feet. My fingers brushed against the cold plastic of the blue folder. "Hidden Hills?" I asked. "That's a big commitment, Caleb. It's what success looks like, Joshua. You wouldn't understand." He sneered. "No," I said, pulling the folder out and slamming it onto the table. It slid across the polished mahogany and hit his wine glass with a sharp clink. "I don't think I do, but maybe this will explain it." "What is this?" Caleb asked, looking at the folder like it was a bomb. "Open it. Is this your resume? Are you asking me for a job?" Caleb laughed nervously. "Because I told you we're not hiring entry-level. Open it." My voice wasn't loud, but it had the authority of a CEO. It was a tone they had never heard from Honda Joshua. Caleb reached out. His hand hesitated. He sensed something was wrong. He flipped open the cover. He read the first line. His smirk vanished. He read the second line. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking like gray putty. This isn't possible, he whispered. What? My father demanded. What is it? It's a notice of default, Caleb stammered. From the bank. That must be a mistake, my mother said dismissively. Caleb just closed a huge deal. Read the creditor's name, Caleb, I said. Look at who owns the note now. Caleb looked at the bottom of the page. He squinted. Then his eyes went wide with terror. He looked up at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. J&E Holdings LLC, he read. J&E, I said. Joshua and Emily. Bingo? I leaned back, crossing my arms. I bought your debt, Caleb. The bank was going to seize your house on Tuesday. They were going to throw you, Hannah, and the kids on the street because you haven't paid your mortgage in 4 months. You bought the debt? My father stood up. You don't have $300, let alone $300,000. Sit down, Dad, I said. Don't tell me to. Sit down. I roared. The sound echoed off the walls. Isaac jumped. My father sat down, stunned. I have stayed silent for 5 years, I said, my voice shaking with suppressed emotion. I let you call me a failure. I let you mock my car. I let you mock my parenting. But today you made my son cry, and that ends now. I looked at Caleb. You're not moving to Hidden Hills, Caleb. You're broke. You're unemployed. And you're a fraud. Fraud, my mother shrieked. How dare you? Ask him about the W-2S, Mom, I said calmly. Ask him why he forged tax documents to try and scam a bank for a mansion he can't afford. That's a felony, Caleb. I could send you to prison with 1 phone call. All eyes turned to Caleb. He was sweating profusely. It's a temporary cash flow issue, Caleb stammered. Colton doesn't understand high finance. I understand that you haven't had a job in 8 months. I cut him off. That's a lie, Caleb shouted, slamming his fist on the table. I go to the office every day. You go to Starbucks. Elena told me, I said. Caleb whipped his head around to look at his wife. You talked to him? Hannah stood up. She was trembling, but she looked him in the eye. I had to, Caleb. We have no food. I was buying rice with change from the car console. Joshua gave me money for groceries. You ungrateful. Caleb started to lunge at her. Don't you move, I shouted. I reached into my pocket again. I pulled out a key fob. It wasn't the Honda key. It was heavy, sleek, and adorned with a crest that everyone in that room recognized. I tossed it onto the table next to the blue folder. It landed with a heavy thud. Thunk. What is that? My father asked, eyeing the Porsche crest. That, I said, is for the car parked 3 blocks away because I didn't want to embarrass you. It's mine. Paid for in cash. A Porsche, Caleb whispered. You drive a Honda. I drive a Honda because I don't need a car to tell me I'm a man, I said. I own J&E Holdings, Caleb. I'm not a freelancer. I'm an asset manager. My net worth is, well, let's just say I could buy that house in Hidden Hills cash if I wanted to. But I don't. Because I don't need to prove anything to people who don't love me. The dynamic in the room shifted so violently I could almost feel the air pressure change. Suddenly, I wasn't the failure. I was the power. You know that feeling when a storm finally breaks, and the sudden silence is louder than the thunder? That was the dining room. My parents were staring at me as if I had grown a second head. You have money? My mother whispered. Her eyes didn't fill with pride. They didn't fill with relief. They filled with calculation. I could see the gears turning. She was recalculating my value. Joshua, she said, her voice softening into that manipulative sweetness I hated. Why didn't you say something? We're family. We could have invested together. Invested? I laughed bitterly. You mean I could have bailed Caleb out sooner? You mean you could have bragged about me? No, Mom. I wanted to see if you respected me when I had nothing. And I got my answer. You treated me like dirt. I turned to Isaac. He was looking at me with wide eyes. Isaac, I said gently, pack your violin. We're leaving now. Wait a minute. My father stood up, trying to regain control. You can't just come in here, throw keys around, and leave. We are your parents. If you have this much money, you have a responsibility to this family. Caleb is your brother. If you own his debt, you just forgive it. That's what family does. Forgive it. I looked at my father with disbelief. He tried to get you to take custody of my son, Dad. Did you know that? He called me this week and threatened to have you sue for custody because I was poor. My father went pale. He looked at Caleb. Caleb looked down at his shoes. Is that true? My father asked Caleb. Caleb didn't answer. It is, I said. And you, Dad? You agreed with him tonight. You said Isaac needed to be straightened out. You wanted to take my son away. We just want what's best for the boy, my mother cried. A boy needs a mother. You can't raise him alone. I am raising him, I shouted. He is kind. He is talented. He is brilliant. He got a full scholarship to St. Jude's on his own merit. And you told me to decline it to protect Caleb's feelings. I picked up the blue folder. Here is the deal, I said, addressing the room. Caleb, you have 30 days to find a job. A real job. If you miss a payment to me, to J&E Holdings, I foreclose. I will not hesitate. I will put this house on the market. You wouldn't, Caleb gasped. Try me. I looked at my parents. And you too. You won't be seeing us for Sunday dinners anymore. Not until you can learn to respect my son exactly as he is. If I hear one more word about him being soft, or needing a mother, we are gone forever. I stood up. Come on, Isaac. Isaac jumped up, grabbing his violin case. He looked taller somehow. He looked at Caleb, then at Nathan. My dad is cool, Isaac said to Nathan. It was the first time he had ever talked back. We walked toward the door. The silence behind us was deafening. It was the sound of an entire family structure collapsing under the weight of the truth. As I reached for the doorknob, my heart was pounding. I felt lighter than I had in 5 years. Joshua, wait! My father ran out after us. I stopped on the walkway, but I didn't turn around immediately. I took a deep breath. Joshua, please. His voice was desperate. Don't leave like this. We were worried. We didn't know. I turned around. Under the porch light, my father looked old. For the first time, I didn't see the giant who ruled my childhood. I just saw a scared old man who realized he had bet on the wrong horse. You didn't know because you didn't look, Dad, I said. You saw what you wanted to see. You saw a loser, and you treated me like one. But the money, Joshua, if you have that kind of wealth, you can't let your brother sink. He has children. Think of Nathan. I am thinking of them, I said. That's why I'm forcing him to grow up. If I bail him out, he learns nothing. He needs to hit rock bottom. You're cruel, my father spat. Money has changed you. Money didn't change me, Dad. It just revealed who everyone really is. Then I remembered something. Something I had found in the financial audit Mr. Gray had run on the family to check for connected liabilities. It was the final nail in the coffin. By the way, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper, I know about the insurance money. My father froze. What? Emily's life insurance. The $150,000 was what was left after you and Mom took your cut for the funeral expenses. You handled the arrangements. You told me the funeral cost $42,000. It was a very nice service, my father stammered. I saw the invoice from the funeral home yesterday, Dad. It cost $12,000. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. You stole $30,000 from a grieving widower, I said, tears stinging my eyes. You stole from your dead daughter-in-law, and I tracked the transfer. You used it to buy Caleb a graduation gift. That Rolex he's wearing? That's Emily's money. His face crumbled. The moral high ground he had tried to stand on disintegrated into dust. "Don't call me," I said. "I'll call you when I'm ready," which might be a long time. I turned and walked away. I pulled out my phone and texted Mike, the driver service I used for business events. "Bring it around." 2 minutes later, the low rumble of a twin-turbo V8 engine echoed through the quiet suburban street. The black Porsche Panamera rolled up to the curb, its LED lights cutting through the darkness. Mike stepped out and tossed me the keys. "Evening, Mr. Miller." "Thanks, Mike. Can you drive the Honda back to the apartment?" "You got it, boss." Isaac's jaw dropped. "Dad? That's your car?" "This is our car, Isaac." I opened the passenger door for him. He slid into the creamy leather seat, looking around at the buttons, the screens, the luxury. He touched the dashboard tentatively. "It's like a spaceship," he whispered. I got in the driver's side. I looked at the house one last time. I could see Caleb standing in the window watching us. I revved the engine. It wasn't a show-off rev. It was a growl of dominance. I put it in drive and we pulled away, leaving the toxic past in the rearview mirror. This is the moment that changed everything. The moment I finally took control. The morning after the dinner, the sun didn't just rise. It felt like it exploded into my bedroom. For the first time in 5 years, I didn't wake up with that heavy, suffocating weight on my chest. You know the feeling I'm talking about. The dread of facing people who make you feel small, the anxiety of keeping secrets, the constant defense mechanism of pretending to be less than you or just to survive the day. It was gone. I walked into the kitchen. Isaac was already up, dressed in his school uniform. But something was different. Usually, he'd be slumped over his cereal bowl, dreading the day, dreading the whispers about his weird instrument or his poor dad. Today, he was standing by the window, airplaying his violin with a spoon, humming a tune. "Ready for the ride?" I asked, grabbing an apple. He grinned, a brightness in his eyes I hadn't seen in months. "Is the spaceship still outside?" "It sure is." We walked out to the parking lot of our apartment complex. The black Porsche Panamera Turbo S sat there like a panther among house cats. My neighbors, good people who worked hard but lived check to check, stopped and stared. I waved at Mrs. Higgins from 2B. She dropped her laundry basket. "Just borrowing it for the day, Mrs. Higgins," I joked. I didn't want to explain J&E Holdings at 7:30 a.m. The drive to school was the shortest 20 minutes of my life. The car glided over potholes that usually rattled my teeth in the Honda. When we pulled up to the drop-off zone, the reaction was visceral. Usually, the line was full of minivans and sensible sedans. The low rumble of my engine turned heads immediately. I saw Nathan, my nephew, getting out of his mother's car, an older SUV, since Caleb had taken the Mercedes to look for clients, which we now knew meant hiding at Starbucks. Nathan's jaw hit the pavement. I put the car in park and got out to open Isaac's door. I wanted this moment to be burned into his memory. Not the car was just metal and rubber, but the confidence. I wanted him to know he didn't have to hide anymore. "Have a great day, Isaac," I said, loud enough for the nearby parents to hear. "Remember, head high." Isaac stepped out. He adjusted his backpack, looked at Nathan, gave a small, confident nod, and walked into the building. He didn't look back. He didn't shrink. That was the moment I knew we were going to be okay. But the real work was just starting. Breaking free is one thing. Staying free is another. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of logistics and legalities. I stuck to my word. I didn't kick Caleb out of his house immediately. I'm not a monster, but I put him on the strictest repayment plan Mr. Gray had ever drafted. I called it the reality check protocol. Caleb had to sell the Ferrari Purosang. I actually went to the house to oversee the tow truck loading it up. Watching that red symbol of his arrogance roll away on a flatbed was more satisfying than any dividend check I had ever received. He had to sell his expensive watches, including the Rolex bought with Emily's funeral money. That particular watch I bought back myself from the pawnshop he used, and I put it in a safe deposit box for Isaac. It belonged to his mother's memory, not Caleb's wrist. He had to downgrade his lifestyle to match his actual income, which was currently zero. Every dollar he scraped together went to me, the creditor. The golden child was now an employee of his own mistakes. Hannah, to her credit, was stronger than I expected. She filed for legal separation 3 days after the dinner. I sat down with her and her divorce lawyer privately. "I can't afford a retainer, Joshua," she had said, tears streaming down her face. "He drained the joint accounts." "I know," I said. "J&E Holdings will cover your legal fees. Consider it a loan against your future happiness. No interest." I also helped her find a rental property, a nice, modest townhouse in a good school district, and I paid the lease for the first year up front. I told her to consider it an investment in her freedom. She cried for an hour, but they were happy tears. She got a job as an office manager and started smiling again. As for my parents' silence, the phone didn't ring. No apologies. No guilt trips. I suspect the shame of me knowing about the stolen insurance money was too much for my father to handle. His moral authority had evaporated. They were alone in their big, empty house with only their pride to keep them warm. 3 months later, I decided it was time for me and Isaac to move. The apartment held too many memories of the struggling years. We needed a fresh canvas. I didn't buy a mansion. I didn't buy the Hidden Hills house Caleb had lusted after. That kind of flashy wealth attracts the wrong kind of attention, and I had no interest in trying to impress neighbors I didn't like. Instead, I bought a historic farmhouse on the edge of town. It had 4 acres of land, old oak trees, and most importantly, a detached carriage house that I converted into a soundproof music studio for Isaac. It was a home, a real one. One Saturday afternoon, about 6 months after the dinner of judgment, I was in the garden, trying to figure out how to plant tomatoes. I was covered in dirt, wearing an old t-shirt. A car pulled into the long gravel driveway. It was a beat-up sedan, the kind Caleb used to make fun of. My brother Caleb stepped out. I hadn't seen him since that night. He looked deflated. He had lost weight. His suit was gone, replaced by slacks and a polo shirt that looked a bit worn. He walked with a slight stoop, the swagger completely erased from his posture. I stood up, wiping my hands on a rag. "Caleb." "Joshua," he nodded, looking around the property. "Nice place. A bit rustic for a millionaire, isn't it?" "It's peaceful," I said. "What do you want?" He shifted his weight. "I came to bring you the check for this month's mortgage payment." He handed me an envelope. I didn't open it. I knew the amount would be correct. Mr. Gray had told me Caleb was working 2 jobs, one in car sales, entry-level, and one doing consulting gigs on the side. He was grinding. "You could have mailed it," I said. "I know." He sighed. He looked at his shoes. I wanted to see you." He hesitated. I waited. I wasn't going to make this easy for him. "Mom and Dad are not doing well," he said finally. "Dad's blood pressure is up. Mom just sits in the living room looking at old photo albums. They miss Isaac. They miss the idea of Isaac." I corrected him. "They miss having control." "Maybe," Caleb admitted. He looked up at me, and for the first time in his life, his eyes were clear. No malice. No scheme. Just exhaustion. "Look, Joshua. I know I was a jerk. Okay. I was drowning and I lashed out. I was jealous. You had the freedom I pretended to have. You had the relationship with your son that I never had with Nathan. I hated you for it. It was the closest thing to an apology I was ever going to get." "I appreciate that, Caleb," I said. "But you didn't just lash out. You tried to turn my son against me. You tried to take him away. You committed fraud." "I know," he whispered. "I'm paying for it. Hannah won't even look at me when I pick up the kids. I'm living in my old bedroom at Mom and Dad's. I'm 34 years old and my mother is doing my laundry. It's hell." I looked at him and felt a strange emotion. It wasn't forgiveness exactly. It was pity. The golden child had rusted. "Keep making the payments, Caleb," I said softly. "Build your life back. But do it for yourself this time. Not for an audience. Not for Mom and Dad. He nodded. He turned around and walked back to his beat-up car. As he drove away, I realized that my revenge wasn't seeing him suffer. My revenge was seeing him become human. That evening, I went into the studio. Isaac was practicing. He didn't see me. I watched him through the glass. He was swaying with the music, lost in a world where bank accounts and status symbols didn't matter. He was safe. He was happy. And I had built the fortress that allowed him to be that way. 6 months after Caleb's visit, the big night arrived. It was the St. Jude's annual spring gala. I sat in the front row. I wore a charcoal suit. Tailored, expensive but understated. Next to me, the seat was empty. I had left it open for Emily. The auditorium was packed with parents. Doctors, lawyers, tech moguls, people who used to intimidate me when I was Honda Joshua. Now, I sat among them as an equal, not because of my bank account, but because of my son. When Isaac walked onto the stage, he looked small against the backdrop of the velvet curtains. He was the soloist for the night. He adjusted his violin under his chin. He closed his eyes and began to play. It was Vivaldi, the Four Seasons. Winter. The music soared through the hall, crisp and heartbreakingly beautiful. I watched his fingers dance over the strings. I watched the intense focus on his face. I thought about the night Caleb called him a mess. I thought about my father calling him soft. They were wrong. He wasn't soft. He was made of steel and starlight. To stand up there, bearing his soul to hundreds of strangers, carrying the weight of his past, that was the bravest thing I had ever seen. Tears streamed down my face. I didn't wipe them away. I let them fall. When he finished, there was a second of absolute silence. Then the room erupted. People stood up. The applause was like thunder. Isaac opened his eyes. He looked, scanning the crowd. He wasn't looking for the applause. He was looking for me. When our eyes locked, he smiled. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated joy. In that moment, the ghost of the sad, lonely widower I used to be finally faded away. I wasn't just surviving anymore. We were thriving. 1 year later, the anniversary of Emily's death. For the past 5 years, this day had been a black hole. A day where I would shut the curtains, turn off the phone, and just exist in the dark. But this year was different. "Dad, are you ready?" Isaac called from the hallway. "Coming." I walked out. Isaac was wearing a nice button-down shirt and khakis. He looked so much older than 11. He had grown 3 inches in the last year. We got into the Porsche. We didn't drive it much. I still preferred the Honda for grocery runs to stay humble. But today felt like an occasion for respect. We drove to the cemetery on the hill. It was a beautiful day, the kind Emily loved. Blue skies, a slight breeze. We walked to her grave. I had pre-ordered a massive arrangement of white lilies, her favorite. We placed them against the cold stone. Emily Miller, beloved wife and mother. I stood there, holding Isaac's hand. "She would have loved the house," I said softly. "She always wanted a garden." "She would have loved that you're happy again," Isaac said. I looked down at him. "I am happy, Isaac. You made that happen." Isaac kicked at a pebble on the grass. He was quiet for a moment, thinking. "Dad." "Yeah, bud. I have a confession." My heart skipped a beat. "What is it? Are you okay? You know how you thought you were hiding the money from me? For all those years." I nodded. "Yeah, I didn't want you to turn into a brat. Or think that money solves everything." Isaac chuckled. "I kind of knew." "You knew?" I was stunned. "How?" I was so careful. "We ate macaroni and cheese 3 nights a week. Not about the millions or J&E holdings," he said. "But I knew we weren't poor. I remember when I was 7, I broke my arm. The hospital bill was huge. I heard Grandma talking about it, saying you'd be in debt forever. But then the next day you were whistling in the kitchen. You paid it. You never stressed about money, Dad. You stressed about people. You stressed about Grandma and Grandpa yelling. But never about bills." I stared at him, stunned by his perception. "Kids see everything." "I also saw your computer screen once," he admitted sheepishly. "I saw a graph going up, like really high up. I thought you were playing a video game where you were winning. I guess you were. I crouched down so I was eye level with him. If you knew, why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you ask for a PlayStation? Or fancy sneakers? Why did you let the other kids make fun of our car? Isaac shrugged. Because I liked our secret. Felt like we were spies. We were pretending to be normal, but we had this superpower. He looked at Emily's headstone, then back at me. And besides, Uncle Caleb had all the stuff. He had the cars and the big TV and the swimming pool. But he was always angry. He was always screaming at Nathan. Nathan was miserable, Dad. He had every toy in the world, but he hated going home. Isaac grabbed my hand tighter. You were always there. You played Legos with me. You listened to my violin practice even when I sounded like a dying cat. You cooked dinner even if it was burnt sometimes. I didn't want to be rich like Caleb. I wanted to be happy like us. I felt the breath leave my lungs. I had spent years trying to protect Isaac from the world, thinking money was the shield. I thought my legacy was the portfolio, the assets, the screw-you money I could drop on the table to silence my enemies. But I was wrong. My legacy wasn't the blue folder. It wasn't the Porsche. It wasn't J&E Holdings. My legacy was standing right in front of me. My legacy was a boy who could see the difference between price and value. A boy who chose time over toys. A boy who saw his father not as a wallet, but as a presence. You're a wise man, Isaac Miller, I whispered, pulling him into a hug. Wiser than I'll ever be. I know. He grinned into my shoulder. Mom probably helped with that. We stayed there for a long time, just watching the clouds move across the sky. I talked to Emily in my head. I told her about the look on Caleb's face when the truth came out. I told her about the music room. I told her that we made it, not because we were rich but because we broke the cycle. As we walked back to the car, my phone buzzed. It was an email from Mr. Gray. Subject: Quarterly Report and Charitable Trust Update. I had started a foundation in Emily's name 2 months ago. It provided scholarships for kids in single-parent homes who wanted to study the arts. Kids who were called soft or messy by the world. I put the phone away. Hey, I said, opening the car door. What do you say we go get some ice cream? The cheap kind. From the truck in the park. Isaac's eyes lit up. The one with the gumball eyes? The one with the gumball eyes. We drove off, leaving the cemetery behind. The rearview mirror reflected the road we had traveled. It was bumpy. It was full of potholes and detour signs put up by people who didn't believe in us. But the windshield was wide open. I'm Joshua. I'm a widower. I'm a father. And yes, I'm a wealthy man. But the richest thing I own isn't in the bank. It's the knowledge that when the world tried to tell my son he was broken, I had the power and the love to prove them wrong. And that, my friends, is a wealth that no foreclosure notice can ever take away. This story wasn't just about a satisfying revenge or a secret fortune. At its core, it's a lesson about self-worth and the definition of success. We live in a world that loves to judge us by our cover, the car we drive, the job title we hold, or the relationship status we have. My family judged me as half a man because I was a single dad driving a Honda. They judged Isaac as weak because he chose a violin over a football. But the truth is, your value is never defined by someone else's inability to see it. There were 3 key takeaways I want you to walk away with. Silence is power. You don't need to broadcast your success to validate it. Sometimes, moving in silence and building your foundation in private is the strongest move you can make. The loudest person in the room, like Caleb, is often the most insecure. Break the cycle. Toxic family dynamics don't fix themselves. You have to be the one brave enough to draw the line, even if it means walking away. You cannot heal in the same environment that made you sick. Presence over presence. Isaac didn't care about the money. He cared that I was there. To all the parents listening, your children want your time, not your things. A Porsche is nice, but a father who listens is priceless. I want to hear from you. What was the moment in the story that hit you the hardest? Was it the dinner table reveal? Or was it Isaac's confession at the end? If you believe that integrity is worth more than image, please type good in the comments below. Let's flood the comment section with positivity to remind everyone that good fathers and strong families come in all shapes and sizes. Thank you for listening to my story. Stay strong, stay silent, and keep building.